My name is Jane Richards, and I'm a retired GP.
So Jane, you made a fascinating discovery recently of something you had in your house. Can you just tell me what it is and explain it?
Well, when I moved into this house, my parents, my father was dead, my mother was moving out of the cottage, and among other things that we found in the corner cupboard, which he had left to me, were all his sermons, which he had written meticulously out in full throughout his time as a priest. And the last thing I wanted to do was just throw them away. They were obviously of some importance. My father's name was Francis David Burley Richards, and he was the Vicar of Crediton during the war years, and from 1940 onwards.
You recently found one of your father's sermons, which is particularly pertinent to this year and a particular anniversary. Can you just tell me what that is?
Yes, it so happens that it's the sermon that he gave on the Sunday after the announcement of the peace in Europe. It was the Sunday after Ascension Day, and it was a thanksgiving for victory in Europe. And he gave it in Crediton Church on May the 13th, 1945.
Can you remember that day at all? Can you remember that time?
Oh, I can remember that time very clearly, because I can remember when war broke out. We were in London at that time, because he was then a minor canon at St Paul's Cathedral. They had to fire watch in the cathedral, and he was being one of the younger minor canons. He was up under the cross, but at the top of the dome of St Paul's Cathedral, because he was considered young enough to be able to get there. So he saw the bomb that fell down almost to Queen Anne's, footsteps and rolled down Ludgate Hill.
I mean, it's incredible because St Paul's Cathedral is one of those symbols of survival of the Blitz,
yes.
which I think most of us kind of, even those of us
Yes.
who weren't born,
can see. Yes, it is a survival symbol. It survived all that fire and things that were around it, and it was on either side of the dome and things.
And during the course of the war, at some point, your father moved to become Vicar of Crediton.
The vicarage of Crediton came up, and my grandmother had been born in Crediton, his mother. And so he came down, and they taught him, oh, yes, so you're nearly a local. And, oh, my God, if you can sing in St Paul's Cathedral, you can probably fill Crediton Church all right.
What was the experience of spending the rest of the war years in Crediton like for you as a family?
We were remarkably free. We had a lot of freedom. I must admit, from time to time, the ARP used to come saying, Mrs. Richards, are these yours? Mama would have to admit that they were, because we went out all over the place. We had a lot of freedom, really. But the bombing of Exeter in 1942 is very clearly etched on my memory, because that was a Sunday night. And, we had to get out. And so all our windows fell in. Daddy was up in the tower of Crediton Church, watching, saw this, of course, and realised. And Mama put us in a pram and pushed us across the playing fields up to the local doctors who were friends. So that is etched in my mind very clearly.
Can you tell me a bit about the time that we're marking this year, VE Day, when that finally came in 1945?
I think all sorts of things had lessened. It was obviously we were waiting till we got to the end, and which he does slightly reflect in this sermon. We sort of said got a sort of normality of our own. We got rationing, of course. And my mother used to go into international stores and say, "What do you want this week? Cheese coupons or soap coupons?" Because it was like that. That was the sort of that was normality.
But when recently you obviously found this sermon again.
Yes.
Can you just tell me what strikes you about it in terms of the memories it brings back of your father, but perhaps also any bits that really stand out for you.
This is just Daddy making use of the event to point out, that it was our faith that had kept us going, and as we should do, and that is why we were, we got there.
And are there any lines in the sermon that really stand out to you now?
But I expect it will not have escaped you that in this week, which brought us to the great event of our times, there was also commemorated an event for which the adjective great is too small, an event not of our times, but of all time, an eternal event that affects all mankind. So you suppose it was chance that brought VE Day into the same week as Ascension Day? I do not think it was. But whatever anyone may think about that, the resemblances which connect the two events are no less remarkable. That, I feel, was a fairly prescient comment to make, and one for people to dwell on and go back and think about, yes, we kept the faith.
Yeah, it's amazing, and hearing it 80 years later,
it's there.
It's spine-tingling, isn't it?
It is. It's quite there. That is, what I like that he did draw out at that time.
What do you think he would want the message to be 80 years on after the end of the Second World War, if he was here to preach to his parishioners today?
Probably keep the faith, Don't be doomed. Remember, Christ is there all the time for us. Then, as appropriate at that time, now, as in this rather different sort of shifting time, but he is always there, and this was an example of it.